Athlete Builder back at it. Jim Beebe and Jeff Osaded here today. And though it's our second international call, we had um, Kenny on, the Jiu-Jitsu and Navy SEAL. He was down in South America, but he's from the States. Today we got Jeff, and he's representing Canada, the Sport Institute, Alberta's branch. So our first international call with an international entity focusing on Canadian athletics. And if I'm just looking through the bio, which is extensive, we're going to get into a lot of things today. But with the Olympics coming up, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about youth development. And I'm looking at him. He's worked with, there's obviously hockey. Then there's water polo, which is hard to do outside, but cross country, the oval sports, especially speed skating. So here we have a really smart guy, and shout out to Mike Soroka, the baseball pitcher, most recently with the Cubs. When he was on last, I'm like, hey, do you know anybody else to have on my show? Because I'm always trying to expand my reach and get smarter and be selfish about it by having guests on. He goes, go get a hold of Jeff Osadec. I go, well, who's that? He goes, he's out of Canada. And I learned that Mike was from Canada. And apparently Jeff started working with Mike when Mike was still in high school. And he went right from high school to the minor leagues and then the big leagues in baseball. So shout out Mike Soroka and Canada for having Jeff Osadec here today out of Alberta. Man, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for getting a hold of me. I really do appreciate the shout out from Mike. Long term, I had that kid from 17 years old all the way through his years into Atlanta, Cy Young year, where he was a runner-up. Can't ask for a nicer kid. Those are the kids you like. When you have him in the room, you just feel better about what you're doing. So I really appreciate you reaching out and asking me to be on your podcast. I'm really excited about this.
Recently I turned 50 in 24 at the end in December. And my wife's like, where do you want to go for your 50th? I think, I want to go to Canada. And she's like, really? Where do you want? Where? I want to go to Banff. I've looked at it for a couple years. I've never been. And so this last summer in July, yeah, middle of June, we were in Canada 10 days. And Yoho and Jasper. And it turns out there's a big fire there that was there, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah,
But just went on, it was for my 50th. I wanted to go to Canada, and it was awesome.
glad you had a good time there. Banff is beautiful. The Olympics left quite a legacy for us here. From the outdoor sports, I moved to Calgary specifically because of the opportunity. I grew up in a small town in Manitoba, and I knew I wanted to coach at some aspect. When you're in a small town in Manitoba and you're riding your bike because you're training for hockey, I would literally have farm trucks pull up going, you need a ride, just throw the bike in the back. Like, they did not get the idea of training. Training was hard work.
Mm-hmm.
There was no objective to it. It happened. So I love the idea of training. I love the idea of, if you do something physical, there's an adaptation to the body. I didn't quite know what it was, but it happened. And that's what got my curiosity piqued. And that's how I ended up with, I love that you said extensive. My wife and family would call it a lost bio because it was so long. I went to school for 11 years in university. And that was basically because when we started, there really wasn't, I'm a few years behind you, Jim, and there really wasn't a pathway for us. We built this pathway of what is strength conditioning now for our younger coaches. They go to school, they get their kines, they can move their way through pretty seamlessly. We had to mow the grass to so they can walk nice and easy now. So I appreciate guys like yourself and others in this field who have kind of paved that path for us, because it's a lot of work. And
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, but it's been great. You think of where we were, and I'm working on projects right now on looking at how we evaluate our younger strength coaches, and what are those objectives that we want them to be able to do. And that's just not from a, hey, you're technically really smart. What do you have that builds that habit forming culture that we're looking for within our daily environment? And I look back to those people that I'm sure you have yourself they were mentors to you, and you kind of look back going, what would they do in this situation? We had a woman here by the name of Rosie Neal, and I say, if Rosie Neal didn't see it in physiology, it didn't happen. So I always say, what would Rosie do? And this is how we how do we have that? So they're going to look at us and go, what would Jim do, or what would Jeff do? That's where we got those shoes to fill.
True. I know we're going to talk a little bit about winter athletics and winter sports for the Olympics. In the Summer Olympics, do you have a favorite sport or two to watch?
I will argue with anybody who tells me that they always watch, it's always 100-meter, right? The lights come on, everybody's there. I still think the best one to watch is decathlon. That's the best all-around athlete. Selfishly, I'll watch it because Damian Warner was an athlete who trained here, was Olympic champion. We've got a couple new ones that are coming up, and One of them will be training here soon. Geez, his name is just, it's eluding me right now. He's an RBC champion. So in Canada, we have the RBC Bank has sponsored a testing camp that happens once a year in each province. And they test the basic skills. You're going to come in and get your stature done, a sprint, a jump, mid-thigh pull, shuttle run test. We call it the Leger up here, the Beep test maybe in the States or Australia. And all that information is collected and then given to the national teams. And it's an ID camp. So Pierce LePage is one of the athletes. And Pierce was a former champion of RBC. And he ends up going to this camp as a track and field athlete, but Track and Field Canada didn't know about him yet. And they're like, well, who is this guy? He sits next to me. He's the same height. He stands up. He's 8 inches taller. Inseam, like can cover distance like nobody's business. I look back at some of the athletes, like we have Kelsey Mitchell here in Canada. She's on the bobsled team right now, waiting to hear if she's made the Olympic bobsled team. But she came out of the University of Alberta Golden Bears soccer program, ends up trying out for RBC training ground with the idea of going to bobsled. And what ends up happening is Track Cycling Canada comes up to her and goes, hey, would you like to ride a bike? And she goes, well, let's try it out. And 4 years later, she's gold medalist in Tokyo, and then I believe a silver medalist in China 4 years later. And now she's said, well, I can move fast. Let's try something different. And tried bobsled and did really well. So I think it's really interesting that we have those opportunities within the Summer and Winter Olympics, and to see some of these athletes that we've had come through here. We don't get many summer athletes in Calgary. For your American podcast viewers or listeners, our network is across every province of Canada. So we've got a center in Vancouver, which is Whistler, BC, is more of a Nordic center. The Victoria one does a lot more of the summer sports, and then Vancouver has their own hub. We're here in Alberta, in Calgary, Alberta. Small one in Saskatchewan, small one in Manitoba, big one in Toronto called the CSI Ontario that looks after a lot of summer sports, a few winter sports. A mix in Quebec, in Montreal, at the old Olympic Training Center, or where the Expos used to play. And then Halifax has a big summer conglomerate of athletes. The athletes can bounce around between any of the centers, if they're traveling, doing testing camps. Because Canada's pretty large, it's hard to keep everybody under the same umbrella, but the network is really good at keeping that communication open. And what we test in each one is really interesting. So we are kind of that summer. We have a few summer sports, but a big mix of winter sport here. So with the Olympics coming up, it's going to be really exciting.
Man, so Jeff, just the question was, what is your favorite one to watch?
Decathlon.
Okay.
Into it. I would say decathlon.
I can see how this is going to go, which is great,
Now, my wife knows, when the Olympics are on, I could watch all the sports. We've been so immersed with some of the coaches that are in there. I could watch table tennis. I could watch tennis. We could, any of the sports that are summer games, winter games. I'm going to be watching all of it because we have an invested interest in.
For sure.
Not the people.
We had kids that left our gym. So one was at the military academy. One is a rugby player for a small school, but the team was 5th in the country. He made All-Star, so now he's down in Georgia. So do we care that much about Marion University rugby? No. Do we care about 3 of our players that are on the team right now? Well, sure. So now we're going to take an interest and buy a stupid Marion rugby t-shirts. But, when you have a vested interest, obviously you're going to pay attention. As for the winter games, you can only watch one of the sports. So it's a really easy, short answer question. You only get to pick one. What's your favorite one to watch?
I'd probably watch speed skating.
The short track or the long track?
Long track.
What I love about the long track, and then there's the cross-country skiing. I've never seen people have to suffer on film so much. And when those people who are rail thin, then there's a slight incline on that cross-country skiing. It's usually some team from Norway that wins it, Or when these people, they're all long-legged creatures with these thighs the size of my waist, right, on the speed track. And they're just going full tilt, right? There's no, hey, man, try a little harder, extra gear in the tank. They're already blown past their nervous system limit. Put it all out there, and it comes down to a hair of a second, to determine the winner. That's pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, and that, you kind of said it best. Who can suffer the most for the longest period of time? That is it. I will say cross-country ski was one of my first sports here at the Institute. And that was one of the ones where it really put things in perspective of what we're trying to do here. I come out there as a strength coach, assistant strength coach for the women and men's team, and you're like, well, I should make them big and strong. But you realize that for the men, they're carrying that for 50 kilometers. Metabolic cost of carrying that extra mass is insurmountable when you're saying we're down to milliseconds of who's going to win. And you're like, okay, then let's figure this out. So how do you make someone really strong without putting on that mass and making sure that they can go do their sport? And I remember coming in my first day and I asked one of the athletes, I said, hey, George, did you warm up? He goes, yeah, I did. I ran here. I said, oh, like, what do you mean? He goes, 10K. Dude, I haven't ran 10K all month, and you ran here for the morning session, and you're going to do 2 today, and he's going to run both back and forth. So they put that on as training mileage. A couple of years later, I ended up going to work with biathlon, and you realize how hard that is, because not only are they now suffering, now you got to pull into that alleyway, and you're going to shoot.
Get your heart rate down.
Yeah, get your heart rate down. And I'm like, coach asked me one day, he goes, hey, have you ever shot a gun? I said, yeah, I grew up in a small town, Manitoba. We shot guns all the time. He goes, well, here, it gives me a 22. I go to shoot, and I'm standing up, and I'm like, no, not hitting a single thing. You go lay prone, and even where your feet are, they got to splay out so you can get your hips down so you're not angled up. And I hold my breath. Now your heart rate's doing this. Then you start breathing. You're like, I may as well throw rocks. And these people come in and do this. And I remember being down in Soldier Hollow, watching our team training, and one of their kids from the U.S. team, junior team, was doing laps, and he just couldn't hit. And I remember they asked him, the coach comes up, he goes, what's wrong? He goes, something's wrong with my sights. And the coach just takes his sunglasses off, grabs that gun, 6 shots in a row, and didn't miss a single one. And he goes, there's nothing wrong with your gun, go do it again. And I find out after, former military sniper, he was their shooting coach.
Wow.
I was like,
wow.
Yeah. And it just puts things in perspective of like how good these athletes are. And I always think that Bill Murray tweet where he said you should have a regular person do the event before everybody else gets out, because you start to see how good people are.
You get desensitized. You think that's normal. And so you mentioned shooting. If you remember the most recent summer games, the guy that I want to say was from the Ukraine, he's standing there. I don't think he had a cigarette in his mouth, not until later. No glasses. He's sitting there with his hand in his pocket, so he's steadied. And he pulls out his gun like he's out there shooting a squirrel on his back porch that's causing a problem. And he's just lighting it up. And I'm like, oh my God, all these other people have these extra lenses around their glasses, all these things. And he is, from some outlaw Western movie. You can hear the whistle in the background, just killing it. And I'm like, who's this guy?
Yeah. But and that's the thing. We look how complicated sports become. And you can go back a couple of years to the Olympic Games, where one of the athletes, it was a downhill skier, forgot her gear or lost her gear. It was something like that. She just grabbed somebody else's skis and does perfectly well. You want to talk about adversity. All these athletes, I need my skis, my boots, my what? No. Like when you're good, you're good.
You're good.
And these people are good.
Can we talk hockey a little bit?
Sure.
All right. Favorite hockey movie?
Oh, Slapshot. Easy.
Okay. Paul Newman. What about Goon, the recent show?
A little overdone, like a little bit over the top. I think because I grew up in like late 90s, I was playing hockey, and funny enough, like one of the guys who was an extra in Slapshot grew up maybe an hour away from us. He goes, that was hockey back then in Canada. Like the guys fighting, dropping the sticks, the ridiculousness of it when you watch it now, like that was reality. But great, like overall good movie.
What about the show Letterkenny when they're talking about hockey and playing hockey there too?
Well, Letterkenny's good when they're talking about hockey, but if you go to Shoresy,
yeah,
I think I grew up with 90% of those guys. They are mannerisms, the way they talk, the way they
right.
Not much different. We kind of laugh about it here in Canada because we're like, it's not a movie, it's not a show, it's a documentary.
Wow.
Yeah.
And one of my guys, Zach Godowski, is from Canada, around Calgary, and so this show comes on. He goes. And my wife finds it, goes, hey, we should watch this. So I watch a couple episodes and I text him, I go, hey, what's going on here? Is this real the deal? He goes, Jim, that is the deal. Yeah. That is the deal. I'm like, no kidding. So, obviously, most of the world, the number one sport's going to be soccer or football, right? And everything's also like money or geography dependent. It doesn't take a lot of money to get one soccer ball and just run around and play. In the country club world, yeah, you're going to have more tennis courts and golf. Okay, fine. Talk about the culture in Canada with tons of just ice rinks out, not in people's yards, but everywhere where people can play hockey all the time, and where being outside in the cold is just part of the deal, and they can have fun doing it, whether you're snowmobiling, hiking, hunting. But talk about the prevalence of just outdoor hockey playing up in Canada and what that culture is really like, because people in the States aren't going to really understand that.
I would say the outdoor culture, yeah. And the idea that we have rinks. Right now, we don't have many outdoor rinks because we've had a stretch of a Chinook, which is nice warm air coming in over those mountains. We've had plus 14 the other day. All our outdoor rinks are kind of wet. But the outdoor rinks, when it is cold, there's a ton of kids out there. Like the other day, we went for a walk through right near the river. And there's a spot where the kids it's a little lagoon that has formed. And they've shoveled it off and they got 2 nets out there and they're just skating. Get their skates on. They're sitting on a log to put their skates on. The culture of hockey, though, I will say, has changed in Canada. And as you said, kind of the country club piece, hockey's getting way more expensive. And so I argue that we're not always getting the best players. We're starting to become that. Hockey is where some of those richer sports are, where it's parents who can afford to get you into the right programs. The academy sports system has now grown much bigger in Canada. So instead of having what used to be club hockey where you'd play your club, like you play bantam, they called it bantam and midget. Midget would have a AAA club. That was always the big thing, but it was always like all kids can try out for it. Now it's a academy system. Like you got to pay some serious money to make this academy team. You're invited to try out. And then when you come on, there's fees. And you start thinking about the cost of skates, the cost of sticks. Sticks are being bought with insurance now because in case they don't last long enough. Man, when I was a hockey player, I was a goalie. A goalie stick would cost me $60. Now you're looking at $400. So it's cost prohibitive for some of these goalies to come in when you're going through 5-6 sticks a year.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so like it's changed, and I would say we still get good hockey players because the plethora of kids that are playing. I just question: are we getting the best players at the right ages? Are we getting them in the right programs? Is there enough support for these programs? Because cost becomes an issue.
It sounds like it's a bit of Keanu Reeves in The Matrix, where you get kind of plucked from your pod at an early age to say, hey, based on your height and weight and money, you might get to play. And you wrote down here about playing your own sport, and hockey was one you kind of gravitated towards. And I love this line from you. I was fortunate enough to have a cup of coffee with a university team. From playing your whole life growing up, and then you see college hockey at a higher level. Even the worst college teams, those people that are on those teams are the best in their province growing up, etc. So what was your holy shit, I'm now around some big boys here. This is a whole new animal. They're not even playing the same sport that I'm playing.
I think it hit me probably a year I was 18. So one of my jobs growing up was to travel across Canada and teach a goalie-specific school. We teach kids how to play goal. A friend of mine who was fortunate enough to go over and learn all this from Vladislav Tretiak. They brought it back to Canada. It kind of grew from there. I attended the school as an athlete. And then as I grew up and excelled in hockey, they allowed me to come out and be an instructor. And that summer, right before I was supposed to try out for junior, whole different podcast. Trying out for junior, I look down the dressing room, and there's this giant individual there, and I look over, and he's got on a huge ring. This is before they were the rings they are now, but it was a Stanley Cup winning ring. It was Lyle Oldline, who just won the Cup in 1993 with Montreal Canadiens. So I went to skate with all these guys who were pro players because a friend of mine says, hey, Jeff, we need another goalie. Can you come out? I was like, yeah, no problem. I was all excited. I get in the net, standing there for warm-up. Lyle Oldline takes a slap shot and rips my glove clean off. I'm looking at behind the net, and I'm like,
oh, man.
I'm in trouble. And like the speed, when you start to see the speed of these guys and just how good they are. And I'll never forget that we had Jared Stoll, used to play for the LA Kings. He was a guy that lived in Yorkton, Saskatchewan, come shoot for us. And I asked Jared one day, we're like, hey, we're doing wraparounds. Can you get a couple wraparounds for the goalies? He goes, yeah, no problem.
Tell the audience what a wraparound is.
Wraparound so means you coming from, like, if you're coming down the right side of the rink, you come down, you wrap around the net, and a tight shot around. So you're coming around and trying to loop it in, trying to beat the goalie across the net so you can put it on the goalpost side. And that's low. So the goalies would have to slide. Jared comes in there and scores 4 of them off the bar and in every single time. And I'm like, Jared, can you give the guys slow it down? He was just so good. And you realize how talented these guys are. And he goes, well, do you want me to, I'll try backhand. And he goes and puts another one off the bar and in backhand, not just forehand. Like the goalies had no chance. Now, obviously, kids, NHL material, but it's just the speed, the accuracy. If you give them an inch, they're hitting it. That was the difference.
That little bit of margin was enough.
Oh, yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. I got to dial way back in the memory bank. So I read Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers.
Yep.
and he references the 10,000 hours, blah, blah, blah. And he uses a number of different examples to demonstrate how having a slight edge makes all the difference. And based on kids' birthdays. So in the States, like I'm born in December. So anybody that's born like July, August, September, October, they're going to be the oldest people in their classes. If you're born May, June, July, like my daughter, July 1st, you're going to be the youngest people. So almost 10, 11 months underdeveloped on average. And what they said was those that were the older ones, statistically, way outnumbered the younger ones. And in terms of just who made the team, because they had that one little piece alone had enough correlation. And you're telling me about these people that can put the puck on, hit the pipe, and then go in the net on the dime every time. That little bit of margin. How significant is every little piece at that level, whether it's the physicality, the intelligence, the speed, your age, right? Talk about how there's that kind of athlete who has that a bit naturally, and how the other guy doesn't have those pieces, but gets everything out of the tank and still makes it happen.
I would actually think you look at, we have a professor that used to be here, Dr. David Smith. He always taught me there's 4 types of athletes. You have your bolter. Your bolter is just really good for a short period of time. You know, you're going to get a lot of winning out of him in that short period. Really good, talented, but doesn't last long within that sport. You know, they got a lot of good makeup, but they just don't have that grit, that longevity. You have a thoroughbred. That's the kid who's just got the talent, born with genetics, got all the skills, got all the habits, and they just do. Connor McDavid for hockey, Michael Jordan for basketball. Actually, no, Michael Jordan wasn't one. He's a different athlete. LeBron James came out of high school just talented, right? You got a wooden horse. Now, a wooden horse, the kid has 0 talent. And I love having wooden horses on a team. Reason I like that is because those kids bring something so different to the training environment. They lighten the mood when it's crappy, when it's hard. You know, they know they're not the best there, but they still come in there and they give 100% effort. And people can see that and go, well, man, if they're sticking into it, I'm going to get up. Like, you bring that culture up.
Nice.
And then you have your workhorse. Michael Jordan was a workhorse. He wasn't always a super talented one on the team, but he worked his butt off. We've had a lot of those. And I asked Dr. David Smith, I said, who have you won more gold medals with? A workhorse or a thoroughbred? He goes, actually with workhorses. Because he goes, that consistency over time builds talent. You're not just walking in with talent. I think some of the sports in the U.S., you just have the critical mass of athletes that you can just pick talent out. I think track and field, football, right? In Canada, I look back at Mike, you know, he's one of those kids that he came out with talent, but we had to foster that talent along. So you have a workhorse. Mike's a workhorse. Look, he's a really talented kid. Couldn't ask for anybody to work harder than him. We look at a lot of the athletes. I've got a kid right now, Cohen Aiken, who's out of Calgary here, who's playing in the Orioles system. Solid work ethic. You just couldn't ask for more harder work ethic. And now he reports in a few weeks here. You know, that's the kind of thing. So that margin of error, depending on the athlete, is a big difference. I like how you went back to the Malcolm Gladwell. Hockey Canada, I used to do testing camps for them with their under 17 groups. I analyzed all their data for 4 years and came back to the conclusion that I could take 3 field tests and their birthday, and I could predict 40% of their team.
Wow.
Because we could just say, hey, and we'd do it because they'd have their camp in summer. The team would be picked in October. I'd come back and reanalyze everything and go, birthday does matter. They just get that little extra. But I said, it's not about, I said, that's at that moment in time. I said, if that kid is still one of those workhorses putting in that consistent effort, how do you watch where their trajectory goes later on? Because you don't want to just, well, that kid's not in our talent pool right now. Yeah, but could he be in your talent pool later on? You don't lose sight of those kids. And that's the ones we want to find out later on, because who are those outliers, like Malcolm Gladwell said?
What is in the water in Calgary before it's frozen? Meaning, it looks like there's a history of coaches and individuals that come out of Calgary that are just studs in the athletic world. And you mentioned that here, and I'm like, so I'm looking this up. I'm like, yeah, there's a ton of people from Calgary that are just, right, just everywhere. Like, what's going on?
1988, the Olympics. It left.
Okay.
1988, when the Olympics came, it was kind of a big deal. It left the oval, the Olympic oval, the bobsled track, the Nordic Center in Canmore. So it attracted a lot of athletes. The years that the oval opened up, everybody skated outdoors. So you want to skate outdoors in Winnipeg, Manitoba in winter, in January. It's minus 35 with a wind chill of minus 45. That's 20 Celsius. It's blasting. You skate fast because you want to get the hell off the ice. But all those athletes who had the ability to skate on crappy ice in the middle of nowhere, Saskatchewan or Manitoba, ruts and wind and snow and drifts of snow, came to the Oval, and you've got the best ice in the world at altitude that rivals with Salt Lake City. That changes. Like most of the world records are broken at Salt Lake City or Calgary, and it allowed athletes this place to train. Now, in 1994, it was recognized that we can do better with our athletes. And that's when Dr. David Smith and Dr. Stephen Norris and the group created the first Canadian Sport Institute. And that's where we started here in 1994, and then they expanded across the country. So it attracted a lot of successful people. Charles Poliquin, most people should know in the strength world, was one of the first strength coaches at the Olympic Oval. And he just brought that idea with him. He started to bring that idea of strength conditioning, and that's when Dr. Matt Jordan and Scotty Ma, who's my director of performance here, and a group just said, hey, this is what we can do for strength conditioning, and how we started to grow that whole entire pathway. So yeah, the world of strength conditioning, it's funny how it intersects in Calgary. You look at Altus, and you got Stu McMillan has come through Calgary, Charles Poliquin, Matt Jordan. You got Matt Price now with the LA Kings. Ryan Van Asten was a strength coach here. The Institute went down to LA before Matt was there, wins 2 cups, goes, I have a pretty good chance of doing well there, and he did well. But, the University of Calgary is well known as one of the top kinesiology schools in North America for a number of years. It just brought people here because of that.
They say, you want to see what your future looks like, show me the 5 people you hang out with the most. If you want to see what the industry's future is like, and you have the 5 to 8 to 10 of those folks all working together, it's going to be pretty easy to say, they're doing some really, really big things there. You mentioned this one component about they want to get off the ice quickly because of how cold it is, or they're on, rough ice, which creates friction, so you can be a little bit slower, and it's harder to be as aggressive. Cannot for the life of me remember the book. It could have been Outliers as well. This guy was playing cricket as a kid, and on the side of his house was, they were dirt poor, so there was a corrugated metal, which has these grooves, right? And so he could practice hitting the ball in cricket, he had this little rock or a ball sometimes that he would throw against the corrugated metal. And when it hits that, you don't know, it's not coming straight back at you like in racquetball or squash, right? So then his reactions all got honed in this shitty environment, right? Or the people that are always running at altitude, like the Kenyans, right? They're going to be pretty good runners if they're always doing that. Talk about how the environment the culture molds people out of your institute, where maybe you don't have shitty ice, but you have the culture molding these folks. So to say Mike Soroka is going to be awesome at 17, 18 years old, that takes a level of maturity, but there's a culture. And people ask what's the number one asset at your company or your gym. I'm going to say it's the culture. Talk about how that culture molded people where you guys are at.
We're pretty lucky because, like I said, we're in a 25,000 square foot beautiful facility. And I'll never forget the day we opened up. That was 2011. We opened up. And at that time, you had to be a national team athlete to even walk in the doors. You had to be wearing Under Armour because we were sponsored at the time. There was no cell phones on the floor. It was just it was high performance culture. And there was expectations. And we had to have our shirts on and buttoned up. And I was like, oh my God, we like to be a little more relaxed than this. But I remember one of the athletes looking at me one day and saying, wow, he was a development athlete. He goes, well, only the high performance athletes, the national team guys get to go in there. And he points at our gym. I said, hey, you know that old beat up building across the road where we used to lift? The weights over there weigh the same as they do over here. And there's more gold medals built out of that building than this one. And it's not, I wouldn't say it's the building itself, people that are in it that build that culture. And that's where the respect, because in Canada, our athletes are funded, but they're not funded extremely well. They all have part-time jobs. They're all hoping for extra, funding from partners, or they're getting sponsorships. So Mike always did really love the idea when he came in here. I'll never forget, he came in right after being a Cy Young runner-up, and he started the All-Star game. And he comes in that off season, he walks in, and one of our interns is there, and he goes, hey, I'm Mike. And this young intern goes, hi, I'm Abby. And Abby goes, what sport do you play? And Mike goes, I play baseball. And Abby just sits back at this, goes, you any good?
Boy.
And Mike goes, yeah, I'm pretty good. And the bobsled team is sitting behind, and the bobsled team is like this with their hands. And we're looking at her like, Abby, is he any good? And they're like, yep. And Mike looks back and said, hey, man, sorry about that. He goes, no. He goes, I appreciate that, because he goes, everybody in this building is good at something, and they respect that. And there was interactions between them. It was the connections that people make that we come in here, what we call that kind of habit building culture, where you're coming in to do hard work. You know it's not going to be easy. Everybody is mutually good at something in their sport. And there's a camaraderie around that. So that's what builds this place. And we've had really good strength coaches here that get along as a team. We're not individual. Yes, we're individual contractors, but we meet all the time. We're looking at each other's programs. It's not my athletes, your athletes, it's our athletes. So there could be days where I've got the track running and I'm bringing my coworker Quinn Sekulich in saying, Quinn, can you look after their track stuff today? You're better at this than I am. I can't be the Swiss Army knife to everybody. I'm really good at certain things in the world that maybe Quinn isn't good at. He's way better at track and field. I want my athletes seeing the best of the best. So then we can interact like that. And I think that's where people see this collaboration, and we come in over Christmas because the athletes are home for Christmas. We want to see them. We hang out with them because we spend 4 years with them every Olympic cycle. It's a family here. And that's ultimately why I like being in this place. It builds that culture of work ethic and everything else.
I'm glad you say that. I've seen that play out a lot of ways and be immensely impactful. And then I see the opposite, where out of one side of the coach's mouth, they'll say, "Hey, we want like what you wrote in your homework here, about being a zero, be a team player, push, show up early, track your food, get enough sleep, right? Doing all the right things, know your playbook and the playbook of the guy next to you that plays, so you know." You're doing all the things, and the other athlete is just faster and more powerful, but doesn't do those things, right? And you talked about those 4 different athletes. So the one that's kind of gifted, and it's not. And I'm overgeneralizing, right? There's plenty of gifted athletes that get even more out of their tank, right? Like Peyton Manning, who's great but got more out of his tank, but physically didn't run well, etc. But anyways, those same coaches are just playing the ones that are faster, and they're getting beat, or they're playing the ones that are faster, and those players are out of position. Maybe it's a team sport. And they'll say, "Hey, man, do all the right things, do the right things." But what the reality is, just be the fastest. It doesn't really matter. So I'm not saying it's like that everywhere. But you can tell, like there's some teams that don't win, and there's some teams that win some. And there's some teams that win all the time. And talk about how hard it is to change that coach's bias, but it's still the coach that gets to decide. So the athlete is still left with some lessons to learn there.
Yeah, I guess what we look at here, and we're, like I said, we don't have quite the same amount of athletes. I'm going to go back to my years with water polo. So when we were with water polo, we had basically 11 guys who lived in Calgary and called the center. It was the water polo national team center. We had a Serbian coach at the time, and when I first met with the team, I was like, "Well, what's your team philosophy? Kick the hell out of all of them, and whoever's standing at the end is champion." I said that works when you're in Serbia, and I could just pluck a kid. I remember being in Agar, Hungary, and you could hear in the middle of winter, like there's something going on behind these boards. We look over, and it's an outdoor thermal pool that's created a water polo pool. The kids are playing like we play outdoor hockey. They're playing outdoor water polo in the middle of winter. And you could have plucked any one of those kids out of that pool and put them on a national team here in Canada. They were phenomenal. We didn't have that plethora of kids. We spend a lot of time looking at the sports science of training. And what are those marginal differences? So when we say, like, how hard is it to, when you have this athlete that's really good, I'm going to look at that gap of that athlete and say, well, where do they need to be? Well, this is what you need to work on. That athlete's going to have a totally different program. And you start to build those individual gap analyses to put together the most scientific program, because one, our athletes are doping controlled all the time. We can see them come in and out around an Olympic Games or World Championships. Doping control is just, they go, "Oh, hey, so-and-so," they know them by name now. They know their addresses by heart. So we don't have that ability to just kind of make changes that are big and say, "Hey, we're just taking the most talented." Because sometimes, like in water polo, you had who you had, and sometimes you had to make chicken salad with chicken shit. You did the best you could, right?
Sure.
So I look at our years with water polo, and we spent a lot of time thinking about the science and looking at, we didn't have the largest team. We took a team my first year to Agar, Hungary. I remember watching a guy walk out the door, and I was like, Jesus, that's a big dude. You look there, he's 6'7", 280 pounds. The next guy walks out at 6'9", 320 pounds, and his heaviest guy is 220. What the hell am I going to do against that guy in the pool? We were faster than them. We had to look at our leverage. What are we going to do that's going to take that gap and change it? Changing the coaching mindset. I work for the Canadian Coaching Association as a coach educator. And that's what we're trying to look at, making better ethical scientific decisions around coaching? How do you make your plan? Because, like we said, you don't get to choose the most talented. You get whatever walks through the door. How are you optimizing whatever kid you come in from a talent standpoint, from a genetic standpoint, and doing the best you can, get the best experience in sport so that they don't take off at 16 years old and go, I hate this, I never want to come back and do this ever again. So that's a big piece of what we're trying to do, is change that coaching mindset from a scientific standpoint, going, how do you create your plan? What are your objectives? What are you working at here? It's not always got to be hard all the time. There's an ebb and flow to training for them so that they can make it enjoyable for the kids.
You talked about longevity, in different athletes. I think you said it was the bolter that didn't last long. You look at the Bulgarian lifters and their methods, always working to a max multiple times a day, multiple days a week, killing the rest of the world in their sport. But by 22, 24 years old, they're out of the sport, right? And so then they just go on to the next one because they're just breeding grounds for that one piece. And you're right. So you look more long term. You can't be maxing out 3 times a day, multiple days a week. You take what you can, and it's not the strongest that survived or the smartest. It's the one that adapted the best, is what Darwin said, right? So that's what you're given, and you're thinking more than just a few inches in front of your face. Then you got to make some different adjustments and just simply coach differently. You mentioned that one of your keys to success is doing the basics, right? Everyone talks about the fundamentals, but then you wrote here, first, you also wrote it in all caps, and then you wrote the adjective savagely well, or I'm sorry, adverb, right? Doing the basics savagely well. And can you give us one or two, whether it's training, nutrition, recovery, whatever, of the basics done savagely well, where, hey, you know what? I'm a 16-year-old kid. I'm going to be with you for 3 years and whatever sport. We'll say something fun. We'll say luge, because it's kamikaze work, right? So you have to be kind of a insane person, nut. And so talk about some of the basics done savagely well in your mind.
I guess I look at it, I wish I could coin that term, but that was a friend of mine, Underwood, who's the vice president of methodology for Exos. He uses that term all the time. When I say doing the basics savagely well, I always start with a pyramid of look, your rest and recovery is important. The second one up from that rest and recovery is nutrition, hydration. And if you can't get those 4 correct, I don't care what you do at the top. All these kids going, I want the best training program. I said, I can walk into this gym, I can grab an Olympic training program for any sport you want, and I can give that to you. It doesn't mean it's going to work, because you're not looking after your rest, you're not looking after your recovery, you are overscheduled, you are skipping meals. You come back and tell me, I want to know about the best supplement, but you haven't eaten breakfast. Don't tell me about supplements until you come back and say, hey, I've got my breakfast in. And that's not just some sugary cereal. I'm eating what I can. It doesn't have to be bacon and eggs. It has to be your macros have to be there. You have to be putting in the effort. I'm coming to session with water. I'm coming to session with a snack. I've got kids that come in, for the longest time in our freestyle world, freestyle skiing, it took us about 5 years to convince them that they needed to have laces on their damn shoes because they wore Vans every day. And we finally got this culture change. We said the basics. Come in for training. Listen to the plan. I don't want to just be authoritarian and say, listen to my plan. It's my plan or no plan. I do want that reciprocal questions. I want you to understand the plan. Because like you said, there is a long system in this. Not to say that we're going to get everything 100% correct, but we're on the right path. And I want this to be a collaborative approach so that the kids can come through and say, hey, I know my training. I'm taking this day off. I'm learning about myself. At some point in time when we're training these kids, you and I are not going to be there. Are they making those elite habits on their own? Are they making those decisions that are going to lead them closer to their goal? And I think doing the basics of, I put my phone down. I've got a big event coming up. I'm going to put my phone away. I'm not saying get rid of it, but I'm saying you got to put it down for the evening, maybe 15, 20 minutes earlier. I'm going to get some sleep. I'm not going to stay up and go gaming. I'm going to go make sure that I'm getting my sleep. All these really simple things. But we harp on these athletes, and I think we've tracked, I've tracked resting heart rates, I've tracked HRV, I've tracked lactates and all this stuff. And I said, the number one thing we track that tells us whether an athlete's going to be really good, attendance. Just show up and do the plan. And I think we look at that saying, those are the savagely well things we want done, basics. It's not about the sexiest program out there. It's not about some unique method. Social media, if I want to look at a bunch of unique methods, I'll go on social media, I'll find 5,000 really interesting things to do. Doesn't mean it fits the plan. It's not always about heavy lifting. Like I said, there's that ebb and flow. There's time to lift heavy, there's time to rest. But I think for the kids, understanding what that looks like and asking better questions and having better conversations with respect is huge. So I hope that answers the question for you.
Help me. I had two bobsledders on the show, and I was just talking to one the other day, and she was in the hospital just really briefly because of a tumble. And I was concerned. She says, "Oh, it's no big deal. It's just some stitches. I got a couple of cuts. No concussions." I was back running later that afternoon, in the afternoon session. Talk about help me understand because you're flirting with disaster the whole time, and you have to be comfortable in that controlled chaos. In some sports, they require that, right? Talk about that, and that's not usually taught. Someone just kind of shows up. And maybe that's kind of built into them a little bit. Just help me understand that mindset of that controlled chaos with some of those people.
Those sports attract unique individuals. That's the easiest way of saying it. Like you said, luge, they are a unique bunch.
Mm-hmm.
They're lovely. I love every one of them. They're hilarious. Sled, you bring in the kids who played rugby. They like the chaos. They like knowing what a little bit of suffer means. They don't mind some bangs and bruises. But it does bring in, and I think, they'll self-select. When you go through your first, I'll never forget, we had an athlete who went through the RBC training ground, ended up getting selected by bobsled, and went down the track here in Calgary when it was still running, because our track is no longer here. She went down with a lady by the name of Sarah Monk. Sarah Monk has probably ran this track 1,000,000 times. So Courtney's sitting in the back there, like Sarah's riding, and so if you don't know, the bobsled is controlled by two little levers, and you can control the runners. And she's talking to her like over her shoulder. And Courtney's like chatting with her, no problem. She down, she gets to the end, she goes, "Oh my God, that was so much fun. I love it. That was the first time down the track." The next time she went down the track with just a general, like, first-timer pilot, she said her head just bounced back and forth against that sled. And she goes, "That was nothing like the first run." But she came back, So you see these people who they have that adrenaline junkie. I think of an alpine skier. A friend of mine always said, yeah, after alpine skiing, they all go and party so hard. You know why? Because they made it down 130 miles an hour, or 130 kilometers an hour, sorry, in a spandex suit, and they survived to the bottom. He goes, you want to know why they party and drink hard after? It's because they're still in one piece. But they get that. I think you go into it knowing, like I think back for most of the female skiers, the average is most of them will have an ACL injury by the time they're 16 years old. They just kind of know, this is what I'm getting into. And those that self-select out do that early, and the ones that are okay with a little bit of adversity and chaos are the ones that survive. It's a really unique group because of we'll have probably 2 or 3 in the building with ACLs at some point in the next week, just either having rehab or hopefully not anything leading into the Olympics, but it happens, right?
Yeah.
We know that that's part of it.
Yeah. It was kind of telling that in those 2 examples with the bobsled, there's the high-level expert, or they make the impossible look really, really common. To your point about having Bill Murray do the events, right? Having someone average, so they're able to have a conversation because they're such experts in their craft that it looks pretty easy. And then you have an average Joe, and you're in the back seat banging all the way around, and your head's scrambled for 2 days because it's just an average Joe. But they're still more capable than I would ever be, having never done it.
Well, I'll say, when Mike Soroka trained here, he'd go, "Can you catch?" I was like, "Yeah, I can catch. I grew up playing ball. Yeah, no problem." So he'd warm up. And a couple times he goes, "Okay, I'm going to let one go. I'm going to let one eat." And he'd throw 90. And I'll never forget the one time he's thrown a changeup, or not a changeup, a slider. And he goes, "Hey, glove here." And I put the glove up. And he goes, No, down. So I moved the glove down, and everybody goes, "Jeff's dad, that ball's coming straight at my chest." And I didn't move that glove, and it just went right in, hit. No moving it, it was just there. And everybody goes, "Are you not scared catching for Mike?" I was like, "No, I put the glove there, he's hitting it." Would I catch for one of my development guys? Hell no. We've got a kid right now, he's grade 9. He's on average 3 people hitting live at bats every day. So I'm not catching for him. There's no control. And you see a guy like that going, you've got a glove that's this big, and he just puts it right in the spot, and you go, damn, he's good. And we don't get to see that perspective here in Canada much because baseball's not huge. We see the Olympians that, we watch them come down and do their sprinting and just They look fast. They look powerful. We had the Canadian Olympic or the men's rugby team in here, and they're all just giant. And you realize, okay, they run really fast that way, and they can change direction, and they're strong, they're agile, they're mobile, and you're like, it was fascinating. So, like I said, we are blessed to see these types of athletes come through a building, and kind of like you said, use your view on what is strong, what is fast, or when kids jump, they, oh, I can jump high. Yeah, you can, but I've seen high. I've
Yeah,
seen strong.
sure.
I've seen fast.
My wife and I, we were asked to come to one of the Preachy Speed Schools, which is like a franchise down in the States, and they were holding a combine, like the NFL combine, but they were looking for just raw speed and power. And based on how that combine went, some of those kids or folks were going to be pushed to Winter Olympics with the bobsled and the luge and skeleton, I think it is. So they're just looking, they're like you guys, just looking for raw talent.
Yeah.
And so they asked us to come out there. It was in St. Louis. It's about 4 hours away. So we drive out there having a good time. I have never been to St. Louis and got to see the arch, etc. And so they put it out there, like geographically, come on by. And we're setting up the gates for their speed times, or fly 10s or 40s. And then there's a broad jump and a vertical jump and then a sled push component. And so people that were showing up, there's about 10, 12 athletes. And the first like 7 or 8, well, first of all, we got to see them warm up. And Jen and I were like watching, we're like, oh God, these people have been watching TV. They've been at home, like, no. Then we saw two of the guys. I'm like, okay, all right, there's something there. There's something, all right. But all of them, anyone could show up, right? And they're starting with the 40. And these guys, they're late 20s, 30s, these are showing up. And we see the first guy run the 40 through the gates, the laser timers. And I'm watching, like, my wife's like, oh no. I'm watching through my fingers, and I'm like, oh yeah, here.
Hamstrings hold on.
Everyone, hamstring, rolled an ankle. One guy knocked the gates over, and I'm like, oh God. And then one guy who just graduated from college, who ran track and ran the 100, 200, he gets out there on pavement, not on a track, not in spikes, and you could see with his movements and the force production with each step, him running through the gates, and we're like, okay.
There's something there.
So he runs like a 4.48, something like that. I'm like, oh wow, okay, athlete. And then his vertical was like 38, inches, and we're like, so to the other guys' credit, they stuck it through and went through all the battery of tests. After the first test, you're really taking your second and third attempt at the 40. I'm like, go home, man. But they did all the rounds and everything else, and they're all pulling up with hamstrings, and all those guys are limping home. But there was one kid that showed up, and we're like, okay, that's an athlete. So they moved him on to the next round. Yeah. But it's not even close. The fastest slow guy ran like a 6.6 40. I'm like, 6.6. Come on, bro. Like, but anyways, when you see regular people, then you see elite level talent. It's not even the same spot. Not even.
I guess up here in Canada, we got Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC, is the Olympic sponsor, and they come out to watch all the events. They're in the building the year leading into Olympic Games quite often, just here videoing your athletes, talking to athletes, just building those profiles. And we call it the CBC effect. You see the cool stuff they do in a snapshot. Mm-hmm. You don't see all the hard work they put in the background.
No.
So then you end up with, and I remember I was listening, so we have a cubicle set up in our offices, and I can hear my buddy having a conversation. They just had bobsled camp it was a few years ago. And same thing, anybody could show up. And I remember listening to my buddy go, yeah, I know you're strong. I'll watch your Instagram later, but on your track, you're slow. And he goes, that's what makes up a lot of the bobsled time. So he goes, thanks for coming out. The kid goes, yeah, but I can lift. He goes, yeah, that's great, but that doesn't help you. So you start to see that, hey, you're out for the T-shirt. That's awesome. I give you credit for sticking it through. But we're looking for talent.
Yeah, and you know it when you see it. And and you can almost feel it, like, oh wow, that's completely different. That person's been working at that for a long time, and every little inch matters. So, if you're playing in the Olympics yourself, what's the sport you want to play?
That'd be hockey. I would really like to get back. I haven't been on the ice in years.
Gotcha.
A couple of concussions.
Not even like an old beer league?
No, it's funny because when I started coming back to like when I first started here in Calgary, our training times, I was training general clients at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Oof.
All our ice times start at 9 or 10. So you're gonna try to that's bedtime. So it was really hard to start saying I can get into a regular scheduled hockey game.
Yeah. Your system's just not set up for that goal.
No, and I don't miss it anymore. Like I said, I had a cup of coffee. I sat in the stands. I took really good stats. I had a kid one time go, "Hey, you played in Brandon, Manitoba?" I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "That's where our team plays." He goes, "I bet you I have the stall because the goalie sat underneath the music box." I was like, "No, no, no, you didn't have my stall. I guarantee it." And the kid goes, "Why?" Because I sat in the stands. And he's like, "Oh." The other coaches are laughing. Oh, he goes, "Look, why'd you retire?" Because I sucked. I'm not going to hide the fact. It wasn't that great. I really like the training side of it, and I really excelled at that side.
If and when you're lifting, what's something you like to listen to?
Mike Soroka's playlist. He sends it to me every year. It's a lot of heavy, a lot of Alter Bridge, a lot of Creed now. There's Metallica. I create a playlist. So I work at a high school. We do a sports performance program out of a high school, but that will help support that. And every class that comes in, I said, "What's your walkout music?" And every class has to submit a walkout playlist. So it's just I kind of let those roll. It keeps me grounded to the kids.
That's
What's
fun.
relevant right now?
Right.
It's a fun way of creating a lot of playlists. There's a lot of shitty music on there. I'll give it that much. Some of them are pretty funny, but they say like, "What's the purpose behind your playlist? Why do you like that one song?" The reason but so we have 250 kids in the program, and there's 6 playlists that are pretty solid for us.
Awesome. I know you've been well traveled. For just you and your wife, where's a place you guys would like to go you haven't been yet?
Oh, I'd love to go to Italy. I'm a foodie. I
Okay.
would eat my way from north with all the meats and potatoes down to the south with seafood and all the wine in between.
Attaboy. What's a good sports movie you like to watch?
Sports movie? Oh, Major League if it's on. Hilarious.
My heart, because I'm from Cleveland. So, oh my gosh. Thanks.
It is kind of ridiculous, but it's so much fun.
Yes, yes. I look like a banker in this. What's favorite sport to watch? Is it hockey?
Depending on the season, I'll watch hockey in the winter, baseball in the summer.
Favorite athlete, either alive or dead, doesn't matter to watch.
Bo Jackson.
Mm,
Like, guy could do anything. It's
anything.
fascinating to watch. And I still think the kids nowadays really get, we grew up in a good era. We got to watch Jordan play. We got to watch Bo Jackson play. And I don't think the kids nowadays have any sense of what an event it was when Tyson was going to fight.
Right.
Like
Yes.
the buzz,
Yes.
the Bo Jackson, I think it'd be fun to watch him go again and just chat with him.
One of the guys I just had on the show, he played football at an NAIA school, so not like D1 or 2, but
Mhm.
did that for 4 years. But one year, his freshman year, he did baseball as well. And he goes, I had no idea how painful doing a workout for football and then one for baseball and living that life. I lasted almost 12 months, but I was sick every month.
Yeah.
My whole body's breaking down all the time. And then he goes, and I go, then you see someone like Bo Jackson or Deion Sanders that play both sports when only 7% of high school kids play in college in the States, and 2% play at the D1 level. So then to be a starter and then be awesome and then get drafted in the NFL and drafted in the MLB, that percentage is not even statistically, significant. You're not even a
Yeah.
rounding it. You're not even a rounding error. You're so rare.
Do we ever see one of those athletes ever again?
No, mm-mm.
Like, I don't think so. We
Right.
don't. Like, they were those unicorns.
You have a good book for us?
I always read Alchemist.
Oh, I think I have that, but I don't. It's in my queue.
Yeah, The Alchemist is one, and I have gifted probably 20 plus copies of that book to younger strength coaches, with the
Awesome.
caveat that they have to thank someone who's helped them along the way.
Nice. We had a Marine on who was also a pageant winner and also a softball player in college, and she went bobsled as well. And she wrote this little kid's book on how to, build yourself up and have confidence. And she's like, "Yeah, I'll be on anyone's podcast, but you must buy the book and give it to either a library or to a kid." And it's like $9 or $14. I don't know. I bought 3. It's a nice little. Hey, I'm gonna make an impact.
Yeah.
Favorite superhero or supervillain or one of each?
Gosh, I guess they kind of go hand in hand. Lex Luthor as a supervillain and Superman for the superhero.
Nice.
The yin and the yang. You can't have one without the other.
Yes.
Need them to offset.
What's your favorite lift in the gym?
Clean and jerk.
How
I
come?
can break that down to any single piece of that, and I can get my whole workout done. I guess I look at it, it's a movement, so I can use that with a kettlebell, I can use dumbbells, I can use the barbell, and I've got my whole entire day covered.
Nice. You got a quote for us?
One workout doesn't make a season, but one workout can ruin a season.
With major injury, for sure, right?
Yeah, I think that's why I always tell the young guys like, hey, think about what you're doing with your workouts. There's many workouts in a year. Take your time, take the process, work your way through. You're not making your season over being at the gym. When they get all caught up going, oh, I missed a workout today, coach. That's okay. As long as you're not compromising those workouts every single week because of other things. Like, let's make sure that there's more good days than bad days. But it really does put things in perspective for them. And that was one that one of my professors would always tell us. It really stuck with us because that's a huge one for us here.
One of my colleagues, I assume you're familiar with the West Side Barbell and conjugate method
Yep.
and he and I are big fans of it. A lot of people get misconceptions or they've seen West Side versus the world, and the intensity is not replicated anywhere else. I completely acknowledge that. But you talk to the coaches that are disciples out of that group, and I've been to some of their seminars, and when they're talking about their max effort days and lifting heavy, they're like, "Hey, we don't want any misses." And early on, like years ago, I started going to the seminar, like, "We don't want any misses at all." I'm like, "Let's talk about that." And they're like, "If you miss it, it means you're over 100% of your nervous system and your capabilities, so your chances for injury are through the roof." And I was just going over that with my athletes today at the gym this morning session. I'm like, if you missed a lift, that's on me for not catching that earlier. Like as you're laddering up, your last set should tell you what the next set should be. And if you're grinding out a set and you have not much left, you're done. That's great. You're done for the day. And if you miss a lift, you definitely don't have a second lift in you to try to go back and get it, right? Because you already failed once, and your nervous system is now depleted. So your chances of injury. So to your point, if you can just stay healthy and stack enough more wins every day, that compound effect's going to matter. But once you tear an ACL or blow out a vertebrae, then you got to have a big setback and you got to wait.
What What's your favorite training principle, Jim?
Be as intense as you can, but you still got to recover and come back. So it's not how hard you train, it's how hard can you train, recover, and train hard again, is what I usually tell people.
I always because when I always teach progressive overload. And I
Mm-hmm.
always love the story of Milo of Croton. So Milo, so he was a farmer, and he would have this cow would have a calf, and he'd carry that calf
Oh, yeah,
a
yeah,
little bit
right.
every day. And the kids really gravitate towards it. And I was like, that's the same idea as how we want to train. I asked them straight up, do you ever have braces? Yeah. Do they just crank the tooth into place and put the brace on place and leave it? No, 5 grams of pressure over time moves a tooth. Same thing with training. Little by little, we grow, we get better. Whether that's endurance, that's strength, that's even as a person.
To get those little wins, that's how you fabricate that fake motivation. People say discipline's more important than motivation, and it is. But you can build your own motivation if you know that, hey, I'm going to win the warm up today. I'm going to be on time. There's so many ways to get wins and manufacture that motivation. So, yeah, that little bit at a time and compound interest effect. And having been in a whole different my whole background is finance and investments. So I'm a big believer in the compound interest effect, right?
Yep.
On debt and equity. So you apply that to the body and your overall athleticism. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Where can people get a hold of you, Jeff?
I've got Deliberate Performance Sports Sci at Instagram. I don't do a lot on Facebook, nothing on Twitter anymore. Twitter has gotten a little bit, I had to get off personally for it just to de-stress with things, got a little bit too emotional. But between that and Threads, I spend most of my time on those two. Canadian Sport Institute Alberta, CSI Alberta, and deliberateperformance.ca. I can update that soon. You get busy here, and I think that's one of my pet projects is to keep that one going.
Gotcha. Well, Jeff, it was great having you on today. Thank you for the gift of your time, and I enjoyed the stories. I wish we had more. I got plenty more just selfishly I would want to learn about. Stick around here afterwards. Really enjoyed the time, though, so thank you for the gift.
I really appreciate you making the time for me as well.
For sure. Once again, we're powered by the AEA Institute, and if you want to get a hold of us, it's info@athlete-builder.com. It's Jim Beebe here. Until next time, see ya.